All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, Phil, Victor.
Hello.
Hey, Anna and Victor.
All right,
Hey,
great to have you guys.
Thanks
So
for having us.
I'm going to go ahead and get started right away, just with the short round of intro. So myself, I'm Anna, founder of Startup Dials, and with me is my partner, Victor Rockwell. And today we have a very special guest, Phil Rose, founder of Alchemy. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Anna. Great to be here.
So I see that we have quite a few new people who signed up for the event. So I want to just, a one-liner of what we do at Startup Dials, just to give a little bit of context of what we're going to be discussing today. So we work primarily with consumer tech startups, and a lot of them are in kitchen space, mostly those that are coming outside of the United States and looking to launch and grow in the US market. So going back to why we're here today, I know that many of consumer tech founders are looking to integrate AI into their work, and they look to speed up the process. Probably AI can design products 100 times faster, but the reality is that a lot of it, I want to say majority of it, and Phil, correct me if I'm wrong later down the line, a lot of those AI generated concepts will fail regulatory approvals, cost more expensive, be more costly to manufacture, and many times maybe even confuse customers so badly that they would return the product, right? And well, obviously as founders, we don't want to see that when it comes to our hardware tech that we're producing. So Phil, once again, founder of Alchemy Design Agency in Sydney. So it's very, very early for him today. So thank you for getting up so early, Phil.
Pleasure.
So he worked with brands like Breville, like Williams-Sonoma, companies that actually manufacture and ship millions of units and deal with real customer feedback when things break. So Phil, you've been through hell of getting appliances from concept to retail shelf. Walk us through a little bit of typical product design and development process, and obviously how AI helps you today.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me. At Alchemy, we've been around for about 8 years, but myself and the other founder have about 20, 25 years experience respectively, as you say, going through the hell of bringing small appliances to market. And I think at Alchemy, our process is fairly traditional, where you have kind of the 4 Ds being discover, define, develop, and deliver. Obviously, it gets a bit bespoke depending on the project within those 4 Ds, but certainly when it comes to AI, we find there's kind of this graph where at the beginning of the Ds, it can be quite beneficial to use AI to really dig into user research, competitor analysis, because you're really in that kind of wayfinding phase where you're trying to understand the vision and understand the opportunity. And then as you go down across those 4 Ds, you kind of leave that world of building a vision and you start really executing. So you really kind of taper off once you actually start building that product in 3D, coming up with the actual design aesthetic. But I think probably most importantly, there's this real transition where you start talking to real people and you actually start presenting concepts to real people. I think AI is really good for setting you up to have those conversations, but it will certainly never, ever replace them.
Mm-hmm. So you see it more, well, like your research assistant.
Yeah, it's really good at some of the things that I really love about AI is traditionally, let's say we've got a project to design a new toaster. One of the first things you do as a designer before you kind of go out and talk to real people is you're trying to understand the pain points and the opportunities. And before ChatGPT came along, that quite literally meant spending days and days reading through Amazon reviews and online audits of the product of the competition, where now you can really streamline a lot of that process and kind of feed an AI bot a number of different links and say, go through this and find me the top 5 pain points and top 5 delighters. Now, obviously, you need to validate that and make sure that it's not sort of in the delusion factor. But for that very early research to understand the competitive landscape really, really quickly is incredibly valuable. One of the other ways that we use AI at the studio here is to really understand the patent landscape, which can be an absolute minefield. An example, probably 7 or 8 years ago, we were working on pressure cookers, slow cookers, things like that. And there were around 600 pieces of independent utility intellectual property on those kind of products. So trying to mine through that in the analog days was a real sort of burden. So typically what you'd have to do is design, get a patent attorney involved, where now you can start to feed AI intellectual property information and start to get a better understanding of that landscape really early. So you're not needing to kind of defend yourself along the way, if that makes sense.
So what I hear, a lot of it is sort of like on the research, like pre-design phase, if you will, right? So not necessarily right now you're applying it to the actual sort of design of the product.
Yeah, 100%, Anna. And I think given my sort of age and tenure, I think I do design because I really love it. There's an aspect of design where you're actually creating the object where it is the craft. And I do that every day because I really enjoy it. And I don't ever really want to give AI that part of my job because it is kind of my lifeblood, if you like. But stepping away a little bit from the research side of things where you're trying to sort of get really kind of black and white data, one of the other aspects where we use AI pretty consistently is generating mood boards. So if you've got a client and you're trying to convey a visual direction for a product, again, it's all about sort of time saving and accuracy of data. Pre-AI, we would be sort of trawling through Pinterest or Lemonoosh or any of these other kind of visual libraries to try and find images that describe the vision really, really well. So as an example, when we were working with a brand called Nama, we were trying to do this really nice, discrete, dead front user interface that sat on this kind of nice, soft, white main body. And trying to find an image of something that conveys that on Pinterest, I think myself and a colleague spent about 3 days looking and looking and looking for the right image, because I think with a mood board, you're trying to set a tone without creating it. And if you don't convey that properly, there becomes this big disconnect in how you communicate with your stakeholders and clients, where now previously we used a lot of Midjourney. We're now obviously with chat having the visualization tools. We can now really describe what we want that image to be, and it will get us a mood board image that will really help our client visualize what we're trying to achieve. So for us, that's massive. I mean, mood boards, they're such a critical part of a project, setting that tone early. And I've generally found that they can never be done in a kind of rapid way, but now that we have chat, it's become a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then sort of, so you work on multiple concepts, right? Let's say various mood boards, and then you bring it to real users to show them so that they sort of understand, speak their mind, right, and show their preferences.
There's usually a step in between. So we'll do the mood boards and we'll get alignment with the internal team. And then we'll actually move into more analog sketching, 3D CAD, polished renders, things like that, even 3D prints and prototypes. So I think there is that kind of defense barrier of the client, and we very rarely show real users AI generated work. We try to bring them the real thing that we've actually felt and hold and tested and believe in. But you raise an interesting point about how we communicate visually using AI. One of the things that is oddly unfortunate is how good platforms like Midjourney and ChatGPT are getting at generating images. Early Midjourney was so great because you could give it a prompt like, what would it look like if Dieter Rams designed a chair made out of aluminium, whatever. And because it had so much of that hallucination factor, it would give you these really peculiar results that you'd sort of go, oh, that's really interesting. You could, even though that's completely unfeasible, it triggers this idea. But now that it's getting really such a high fidelity, you don't get those kind of serendipitous mistakes anymore, which is a little bit of a bummer.
So it's a little bit, in a way, you can say that it's also, you can use it to sort of like, as if bounce ideas of one another. Yeah, you know, if you were just to test out some of the concept and see, you know, what would come out.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, again, we don't show our AI generated early exploration to users. We occasionally will with clients, but it's a really good way to validate an idea really quickly. We've been working on a project lately, which is smart tech-enabled home sensors like humidity sensors, motion sensors. And we had this very early concept that we wanted to try and utilize natural materials like wood and glass. And so to be able to go into, back then it was Midjourney, to be able to give it some of those prompts of, let me see it in those materials, it starts to just kind of give you some ideas that you can then really kind of build upon.
Yeah.
So Phil, let me ask you, in your process, and you know the series is Know Your Customer. How do you really understand who your customers are and what they want and what they need? Like you talked about the research you do about what the pain points are on a particular product you're designing. Maybe you could tell us more about how you then sort of, I think we're leading there, right? About next steps. How do you then find out and get to know the customer and how they're going to respond to what you've created?
Yeah. Thanks, mate. I think you really can't beat in-person interviews at that point. I think as we sort of put AI to the side for a moment, utilizing AI to set up those IDI interviews or in-home sessions can be a great tool to help, I suppose, create the flow of the day. But there's really no, at this stage, there's really no substitute for either getting in front of real customers and talking to them with stakeholders from the business that you're working with. And I think equally living the life of what that product offers. I mean, as we talked about in the prompts leading up to this, when we were developing a strategic roadmap for NAMA, we went vegan for 3 months to really try and walk a day in those shoes. So I really don't think there is any substitute for that to get to know the customer. I think the challenge that you're always presented with in a boutique design studio like Alchemy is you often don't have a lot of time to get to know those customers. When I worked at Breville or at Williams-Sonoma, they had a database, they had good sort of project timelines. So you were able to really get out there and get in the homes and understand who your user is. So I do find now in the sort of early days of AI, being able to be quite strategic about how you get into those homes, the questions you ask really rapidly, and then using AI to synthesize that data that you get when you're out in the field really helps kind of shorten that time period, but you still get really high quality results.
Yeah, can I ask you about how you then, so we're seeing founders who they're putting their product out, they're seeing some initial success. When do you and how do you coach them on thinking about the next iteration? At some point, there's always lots of things that define. Once it's in the field, you find all kinds of opportunities to optimize, to change. What's the life cycle coaching and how do you handle that for clients or coach clients on that?
It's a really interesting question, and I think a lot of it depends on the style of client. If it's a brand new startup that's never launched a product, it's certainly a little bit trickier because you've got budgetary limitations, cost limitations, and often you are learning who your customer is when you get in the field. We launched a product this year, a really nice outdoor chair, and we had all of these assumptions about who the customer was that we'd worked on with the founder of this business. And then as soon as we launched, we learned that we're not wrong, but we're kind of over here. We're a little bit adjacent. And that was really interesting because it immediately modified the roadmap thinking and the strategic vision for the brand, where we kind of had to pull everything just over this way a little bit. So that's really tricky. But the other kind of clients that we work with is more sort of small to medium established brands. And to really set them up for success, we generally try to work on roadmap projects or strategic roadmap projects where you're actually establishing what that 5-year roadmap is. You're doing a lot of trend analysis, obviously talking to the customers, wearing the shoes every day, so that then you can establish, here's a 5-year roadmap. It might move a little bit, but I think with the startup space, it's really, really hard to actually, you can talk to 1,000 people, but until that product hits the shelf, there's just this disconnect. And then you have to be really, really ready to pivot, or hopefully not, once you start getting that data back from who your users really are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's true, right? Often innovative products are being born out of the idea of a founder that he really sort of lives and breathes for a very long time, and once it hits the market, the feedback can be different.
Yeah, I think it's also really hard for founders to commit to that really kind of great in-depth ethnographic research. They've got a budget, they've got a vision, and you really need to just run. So I think as we mature as a business and as a brand, what's great is we're actually able to share that story with the next founder of a small startup to be able to really highly recommend that we actually step out of our own instinctual thinking and talk to real people.
Yeah, and it's true. It was actually part of our previous episode that was dedicated to customer research, that I still wonder every day why founders don't budget that research into the actual product design and development, because it's such an essential phase.
Yeah, I think the big challenge that every founder that we've worked with in a brand new startup faces is there's this kind of overwhelming reality that in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months, you're going to have a really big marketing budget. We talk about how marketing budgets are often sort of 4x the product development budget. So I think founders are highly aware of that, and I think it's completely necessary in this day and age to have a really robust marketing budget and marketing strategy to get that product in front of people. So I think a lot of founders in the early days are trying to hold on to their capital in preparation for that. So then it gets really tricky, because then you start doing the marketing, but if you don't know who your customer is, how effective is it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's as if a little bit like this element. Well, it just goes back also to me just a little bit to education, right? Because every founder hears about sales and marketing, so it's sort of like a natural line in the budget that yes, it's going to be dedicated to it. And traditionally, product design development is, relates to the actual design and development work, right? The design and engineering side of it, but not so much on the customer research.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real challenge, and I think trying to bake it in very early, the customer research side, is so important. And again, I do think that's where AI tools can be really helpful, because what maybe used to take 3 weeks pre-AI, you can now do a pretty reasonable ethnographic sprint in a week. I think one of the other things that sort of came out of the COVID era was platforms like oh, I'm drawing a blank, but there's a whole host of really great online ethnographic. Dscout was the one I was thinking of. That's just this phenomenal online ethnographic research tool that we used right in the middle of COVID when we needed to get out and actually talk to people, but you couldn't. So now that platforms like that exist, and you double that with AI to help synthesize the data and even set up the protocol for those tests, you can really start to compress that really valuable work into a much shorter amount of time.
Just so I was touching upon the manufacturing side of it, right? So the engineering and then manufacturing side of it. So when you work with AI, right, and you brainstorm your concepts, do you see any sort of like red flags right away that you're saying, oh, that's not going to go past the engineering, manufacturing phase?
It's almost all you see is red flags. I mean, I think as a veteran industrial designer, you really have kind of baked into your creative process things like draft and part lines and sync marks and things like that. But AI doesn't design like that, and it can be really frustrating because it will spit out this kind of interesting inspiration image, but then you kind of start to pull back the layers and you realize it's really flawed. But aside from the manufacturing limitations that we're seeing out of the AI-generated kind of concept work, I think probably more it's the technical package. ChatGPT gets very kind of verbose and confident about, oh, you just need this sensor and that battery and this, and this. And it's generally really, really flawed. So then it becomes quite difficult if you've got a founder who's used AI to develop a concept to then sort of pull that back and actually look at the technical package that ChatGPT has recommended. There's some flaws there. So then you need to be the ChatGPT becomes the advocate, and you need to become the devil's advocate, which you never really want to do as a consultant. You want to always kind of yes and, but then you've got AI over here who's yes anded a founder into kind of a state of hallucination, as they call it in the AI world. And then the design team or the engineering team has to be the bearer of bad news to say, well, the product's going to need to grow twice the size because the technical package is actually going to be this. So that's a huge challenge. The sort of the confidence that AI has behind its ideas. It's a little bit like a sort of first or second year university student where they're very confident and they really know a lot, but behind it there's holes because there's not that experience.
Yeah, that's what I hear as well, right? That's right now you have companies hiring, not hiring, let's say, website developers, and they would work with the AI engineers to build them a website, and then essentially go back to the traditional developers and pay them double, triple as much just to decode whatever AI creates for them.
It's very face level, surface level stuff. I think AI can give you probably a reasonable looking website, but then when it comes to navigation, it falls over because it doesn't understand human behavior, because we're all a bit sort of quirky as humans. And if AI is learning from data on machines, it's just missing that little gap. And I think that's where it's really important to still take all of that information and do that real testing with real people. It's those gaps in between where I think that real kind of sweet spot of innovation lives.
So this is so fascinating, Phil. We need to do a follow-up, a second. I think since we're maybe getting short on time, I want to give you plenty of time, Phil, to talk about what kinds of clients are ideal for you, and how should people get in touch with you if they're interested in some of the services that you're offering?
Yeah, thank you, mate. No harm in a bit of shameless self-promotion, but I think for us, not really by design, but more by kind of organic growth, Alchemy has really become the studio to go to if you're working on products in the kitchen, whether that's analog products like cook's tools and cookware and things like that, or small appliances with new technology that you're trying to kind of humanize and bring to the market. And I think that really came about because we're all quite into cooking and into food. And there was this sort of realization very early in Alchemy, again, not by design, where we kind of thought, oh, this is great because we actually get to design the products that we love and then have them in our home and continue to use them and continue to evolve and grow. I worked at Philips Design for a number of years working on oxygen concentrators and home healthcare. And it's this really strange thing when you don't get to kind of live and breathe, no pun intended, the product. So for us, the kitchen is a real sweet spot, and we've been lucky to work with really big brands like Pyrex, new up-and-coming brands like Nama and even Brava, where you're trying to wayfind through the kitchen and you get to work with amazing chefs and you get to eat amazing food. So I think for us, if you're out there trying to build a startup that's centered around technology in the kitchen, I think we can really help you understand the user and understand the experience of cooking. I see a lot of kitchen startups where there's a lot of over tech in the products, and I do still think cooking is a really human thing. So trying to not go too far down the road of smart technology and still allow a bit of heart into the kitchen and into the product is super important, and something that we really try to bake into all of our clients' work. And to get in touch, our website is Alchemy, spelled ALQUEMY.design. You can get us on there, or my email is phil@alchemy.design. But yeah, would love to chat to any of the startups out there. I know you guys have both had amazing experience in the kitchen, and that was how Anna and I met in the first place. So yeah, let's have a conversation.
Let's have dinner sometime.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah,
cook dinner. Yeah, let's cook it and then eat it.
Appliances and gadgets. Yeah.
Yeah. We use all Alchemy Design products and create a delicious meal.
Awesome. I look forward to it.
But then, well, yeah, just as a closing question, Phil, thinking about, again, startup founders, right? And, well, weaving it together with the AI that was sort of like the centerpiece of our discussion today. What would be like one tool or one approach that they could go and try today, where they could see the results that could, help them in their, design development work?
I definitely think really having a lengthy conversation with ChatGPT. Again, one of the founders who's come to us with an idea and a concept where we might need to peel back the layers of the technology. What has been really helpful about them having that conversation is there becomes this really early alignment within the project. I often find the first 3 weeks of a project the most challenging because everyone's trying to get on the same page, speak a shared language. And I think prompting AI to develop some of these concepts, albeit they might be a little bit flawed, it means when they come to you with that idea, you've got a very, very clear understanding of what they want and where they want to go, which I think is the biggest challenge in a consultancy is if you, particularly a new client, trying to really get in their headspace. And AI can put that on a plate for you and just say, this is what they're thinking. You can read through that conversation and get a really good understanding. It's almost like they feel more comfortable having a conversation with a chatbot than a person because it's unfettered and they can really just kind of have a flow. So it brings a hell of a lot of insight into understanding what your client's needs are.
Yeah, well then, and then, deep diving a little bit more, but always bringing it back to the customers and one-on-ones.
I think so. Bringing it back to the customers, letting the development team assess the technology, I think is really key. And the feel, I mean, being an industrial designer, it's not just how a thing looks or how a thing works, it's how you experience it, it's how you touch it, it's the temperature, there's so much to it. And I think it's really important to feel those things in your hands and take those concepts off a screen and get them actually into the real world.
Phil, I'm just curious. I want to make sure I understood this. The idea of the creator having a conversation with ChatGPT. Then, so they have this conversation and they keep going and they keep going. They're developing their idea with ChatGPT. then they take that and they print it out and they bring it into you, or they send it to you, say, read this ahead of time before we get together. Is that what you were saying?
It depends. I mean, I think with a new founder, they might not show you that they've done that, but with relationships we've had for a very long time, where a founder begins using ChatGPT to explore, they really bring us into that conversation, and we get to go through it with them and, you know, highlight the pitfalls. But to your point, mate, I think if a founder is doing that without you knowing, it could become a little bit trickier to sort of navigate how you do that. But certainly with a number of the brands that we work with, we engage in that conversation with them pretty early on and go through the steps with them, their conversation with AI, to really kind of get into their head and figure out what they're trying to achieve.
Awesome. Well, very interesting.
Yeah, Phil, thank you so much. It was great to get a glimpse into the day of a designer.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great to be here.
Have your coffee now if you haven't already had it.
Yeah. I do feel like we could keep talking for another hour, though. This has been super fun.
Just scratching the surface.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much, Phil. When we'll have to arrange a new one, and the next session.
Let's do it. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Take care.